Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States of America, said these words: "The greatest gift ever given to humanity is the Bible." On this journey, in the hearts of Washington, in the Museum of the Bible, we will learn what the Bible is, not only from a historical point of view, but also for the impact it has had on the history of humanity and the stories that are told in the Bible. We are now entering the Hall of Illumination, which collects all the existing versions of the Bible that we have until today. The Bible is said to be the best known and most translated book in the world, but much more work still needs to be done. In fact, behind me you can notice an endless collection of yellow books, representing all the languages of the world into which the Holy Bible still needs to be translated. For example, I have a book in the Dano language in my hands, and when you open it, you can see that it is empty, symbolizing the fact that the Bible has yet to be translated in that language. Currently, we have 82 full translations of the Bible and 1,544 translations of the New Testament. The Dead Sea Scrolls are a great testimony, both from a religious and historical point of view. They are all dated between 150 BC and 70 AD. They were written in Aramaic, Hebrew and Greek. A section of the Museum of the Bible is dedicated to Johannes Gutenberg, a German typographer to whom we owe the beginning of the modern printing technique in Europe. Between 1450 and 1452, with 20 collaborators, he printed the Bible for the first time, consisting of 2 volumes of approximately 300 sheets each, and 180 copies were printed. To the Supreme and most powerful Prince James. This was the dedication which was addressed to King James in 1611, when the first English version of the Bible was made known. It is still the most important English version that we have today, not only in the Anglican world, but also in the American. A colossal work of which here at the Museum of the Bible we can admire the very first edition, the King James Version. The British and Foreign Bible Society, as well as the American Bible Society, just to name two of them, are among those which over the last few centuries have been interested in spreading the Bible throughout the world. Today, however, there are many companies that deal with the translation, diffusion, and obviously with the printing of this book. The museum is divided into sections which mainly address three themes: the impact of the Bible, the stories of the Jewish people, and the stories and life of Jesus of Nazareth. This is maybe the most evocative part of this incredible museum. A journey through a faithful reproduction of the historical and cultural contexts in which Jesus Christ was born and raised. We even have a faithful reproduction of people and characters of the time. For example, here we have Rebecca, who, as you can see, is working with sheep's wool. It was certainly one of the main activities of women of the time, as was also the production of wine. For example, here we have the representation of olive trees in a typical landscape of the lands of Nazareth, and as you know, they are often present in the biblical stories. But not only that, here we have the typical illustration of what could have been the daily life of two men with a papyrus in their hands, intent on reading the Holy Scripture. In this case, we are talking about two men with two Jewish names, which are Elijah and Jeremiah. In this moment, I am in the reproduction of a typical house of the time, where most likely Jesus found himself eating many times. I am now with Rebecca.
Shalom.
Rebecca represents a typical Jewish woman. I really want to show you what the diet of the time was like. I strongly believe that Jesus himself adopted it too. For example, we have vegetables, salads. You know, in those lands the pomegranate was very important and widespread. The inevitable wine, grapes, olives. Here we have the typical bread as it was made at the time. We find dates, but also a rich presence of legumes, the inevitable oil, and obviously eggs. Therefore, in this museum, there is a faithful reproduction of what could have been a typical house of the time. I am now inside this place, which is a faithful reproduction of a Jewish synagogue, where people could enter on Saturday mornings. Both men and women could do so sitting on the sides, and you can see here how this synagogue is made up. And think that people would take turns coming back here. And here we have Jeremiah, who will now read something to us. And the Torah was laid out, and not only was it read, but afterwards it was also commented on.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Vahavta et Adonai, v'kol levavka, uvekol nafeshka, uvekol modeka.
This is a passage in Deuteronomy, one of the best known passages, a declaration of love and loyalty towards God, to whom the Jewish people reserved exclusive and profound praise. This was a classic synagogue setting.
Thank you, Jeremiah.
Thank you.
God bless you.
Yes.
The impact of the Bible in the world. We presented this book as a religious and spiritual work, but the intent of this museum is to bring out a very clear concept. It is clear to everyone that the Bible has influenced science, justice, health, the press, education, music, languages. There have been many writers in history who have reported passages from the Bible. Among these, one of the most important is William Shakespeare. Another curiosity collected in this museum is the Bible that belonged to the famous Elvis. Among the many curiosities, we also remember that the Bible occupied not only the front pages of newspapers or weeklies, but was also used by many sportsmen or powerful men who, through writing a verse on their playing shoes or through a public statement, they wanted to emphasize the importance of the Bible in their lives. In this gallery, you will find many of these images. I think everyone remembers the Night of the Broken Glass in 1938 in the Nazi Germany, in which just over 1,400 synagogues were destroyed and set on fire. And in that destruction, in that night of fire and persecution, many Torahs and many Bibles were also destroyed and burned. And this is a place where we want to remember that this was the most widespread but also the most persecuted book in the world. Yet, despite being a book opposed over the centuries, it was also a tool that gave hope and redemption. Do you see, I am in a very symbolic place now. I am in a cell, and above me are the faces and names of people who, following a very serious crime, were imprisoned. However, through reading this book, they obtained the opportunity for redemption. Not a human redemption, but a spiritual one. So this book has worked in people's lives. For some it was a reason for persecution and death, but for many others it was also an opportunity for rebirth and redemption. We are now in the final part of this museum where we can maybe reflect on this very meaning. What does the Bible represent today? I am surrounded by a virtual mural which focuses its gaze and its lights on the most important city in the world, where the social, political and even spiritual attention of history is still concentrated today. I'm talking about Jerusalem, this important crossroads in the history of humanity. Our journey inside the Museum of the Bible ends here, in this time capsule. We talked about history, yet we find ourselves in a very modern place. As anyone who visits this museum sitting on this chair can turn towards this camera and leave a message for posterity, indicating the date and the day. And anyone who comes to visit this museum will be able to watch this message even after many years.